The rib cage. When we're talking about the rib cage, we're referring to individual bones that are joined together with cartilage to the sternum in the front and the thoracic vertebrae in the back. The ribs of the rib cage can move to expand. They can move to bend from one side to another. They expand when we breathe or when we swallow. They even expand during pregnancy to account for the kind of additional space that you need. So the rib cage is a really important shape in the kind of overall character of the body. These images come from Gino Barksay's Anatomy for the Artist. So the rib cage. Shape characteristics of the rib cage is always, different pencil, always taller than wide, wider than deep. Meaning that the rib cage is taller than it is wide and wider than it is deep, if we were to look at the body from the side. Okay. There are 12 ribs total on either side, so 24 individual ribs stacked in groups of 12. The first rib is attached to the manubrium, which is a bone that sits between the first two ribs and also connects to the clavicles, the collarbones. And the manubrium has kind of like almost an abrupt diamond shape there. So it's first rib, 2 through 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, attached to the gladiolus, which is the kind of blade-like shape of the sternum. So 2 through 6, attached to the gladiolus. You might recognize that word or that term. Gladiolus is both a flower, so it's kind of a stacked flower. It's also like gladiator, and it refers to a knife, so the kind of blade shape that you have here. And then 7 through 10, attached to the costal cartilage. Costal, C-O-S-T-A-L, cartilage. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that's one piece of connected, kind of branching cartilage that goes back up to meet the 6th rib at the side of the gladiolus. And then 11 and 12 are what are known as false ribs. Meaning they kind of float out independently. They don't connect up to the sternum. You also might have heard of these as floating ribs. All right, so starting on the side, we're going to do an anterior and a lateral view, kind of matching these views with some notes about proportions. We're going to start with a box that is taller than wide. I'm going to make 2 boxes so that I know I've got enough space for this diagram. Find the center of this anterior view. So our anterior view and then our lateral view will be here. We're going to start with kind of like an open collar shape. This takes up less than a quarter, about maybe a fifth. From that shape, the kind of tilted egg shape of the ribs come out to the side. And the widest point of the rib cage is about 2/3 of the way down. See that here. About 2/3 of the way down is where we're going to reach the end of that rectangle that we've made. And then from there, the rib cage angles in. Curves under. And above that 2/3 line, above that widest point, just about here, is where we find the end of the sternum. And from here to the front of the rib cage is roughly half a head height. So from here to here is about a half head. And the widest point, like I said, is about 2/3 of the way down. I'm going to sketch in the sternum. It looks a little bit like a necktie, which I always think is kind of funny in a way, that a necktie looks like the bone of a rib cage. And the sternum includes the manubrium at the top here. Manubrium we're going to label A. The gladiolus, which is that kind of knife shape. Starting narrow, ending wide. And then at the very bottom, we'll put gladiolus B. It's the xiphoid process, which is a piece of kind of cartilage here that actually just floats. Muscles attached to it, but the ribs do not. So we'll put ABC. We'll put that to the side. XIPHOID process. Xiphoid process. And then the costal cartilage, we'll fill that in once we get to that point. So that'll be ABCD. D. Costal cartilage flows from the side of the gladiolus, almost like a parted curtain. You can imagine a curtain pulled back. So you can see that shape here. And it stops a little higher because remember we have those floating ribs. So we're going to stop that just a little higher than the bottom of our rectangle here. And I'm only going to fill out the ribs on one side. The other side, I'll just show you kind of where the cartilage is. So at the top, we have a little bit, I'm going to switch to a red pencil for this. A little bit of cartilage here that connects to the first rib. That rib curves back and around to attach to the spine. The first thoracic vertebrae of the spine. So the spine is in the back. The second rib comes around and attaches into the side of the gladiolus. There's a little bit of cartilage there. Drawing the cartilage in pink. And there's sort of a boundary you can see in this diagram between where the bones of the rib cage and the cartilage connect. I'm going to draw that line out. Make it a little easier to manage this information. So I've got 1, 2, and I need to get, this is 2, 3, 6. Sorry, to get to 6. 5, 4, I can spread out. 4, okay. You start to kind of tilt down a little more dramatically. Just for clarity, I'm only going to draw the front view of the ribs. So they are curving back and attaching to the spine. Imagine them looping all the way around, but I'm just going to draw the front view. So we got to 6. Remember 7 through 10 attached to the costal cartilage. That cartilage here, so we've got 10 down here, attaching, 9, 8, and 7. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then below those, hanging out, you've got those floating ribs. So we've got the spine back here. Got those last 2 kind of hanging out. All right. So remember, the sternum includes the manubrium, gladiolus, and the xiphoid process. It's sort of a necktie shape. It's also known as the breastbone. So if someone talks about their breastbone, it's the same thing. Gladiolus is like a blade. from the side. Remember that the ribcage is taller than it is wide and wider than it is deep. So we're going to make it the same height, but we're going to make it a little narrower. Going with that tilted egg shape. Top opening is a little further back from the center line. High in the back and a long angle forward. The sternum sits at a little bit of an angle, so it's not kind of totally vertical. It's a little bit tilted. Got the spine in there, the thoracic vertebrae of the spine. And starting with one at the manubrium, it's kind of a special knobby bone. Turns upwards, angles upwards, and the front of the neck often seems like it's at a lower angle than the back of the neck. If you look at how t-shirts sit on people when they're standing to the side, the front of the t-shirt is often lower than the back of the t-shirt. We have 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 attaching, and then 7 through 10 from the costal cartilage. So 1, following that shape, 2, doesn't seem tilted enough. I feel like to change this angle a little bit. Not quite working out the way that I want. Okay, start that a little lower, a little more inside box, so our tilted egg shape is even more tilted. That first rib, that collar, it's a little lower. So 1, 2, 3, 'Shading in the space in between. 4, 5, and 6. 7 through 10 attached to the costal cartilage, kind of dropping down. Where costal refers to the rib cage itself, costal. Something is the costal arch, it's the arch of the rib cage. And then we have our last two floating ribs. So that's 7 through 10, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And then floating ribs here and here. You can sketch in spines of the thoracic vertebrae, which are relatively kind of flattened along the back. So this is the lateral view. From above, from a superior view, we can imagine the rib cage. This is someone facing this way. So it's like they're laying on their back. You can imagine the rib cage as being flat in the front across the sternum, wider than it is deep. So kind of like a octagonal shape, sides of the rib cage going back. There's a plane change on the side of the body, so the front of the rib cage angles back. The short sides here. And then the back of the rib cage is kind of corrugated. And then it comes back and then does a quick bend inward to meet the spine. And the spine, the kind of spurs of the vertebrae come out. Vertebral column is here, so the stack of vertebrae bones. Actually, an opening here for all of the nervous system. And the bones of the rib cage bend around essentially like that. And then the sternum is in the front to meet the sternum. And you see cartilage at both of those connections. So again, wide this way. Wide, and then shallow this way. that corrugated form of the back.